Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to sketch out some of the processes and concepts behind global production as it exists now under capitalism. Um, I'll just basically give a really brief overview of production chains and then mention some ways that they kind of affect poorer countries in negative ways. I'll cite a couple of good authors on this topic. You can check out the description for more info. All the info here is based on their writing as well. Um, so nowadays, the dominant players in this space are transnational corporations. Transnationals globalize their production in two ways. First is through foreign direct investment, and second is through contracts with independent manufacturing firms. I believe this is the most common way for transnationals to offshore their labor. So obviously, offshoring benefits transnational companies by cutting their labor costs, right? Um, but as a footnote, to be exact, it's not just cutting labor costs absolutely, but um, cutting costs per unit produced. So, for instance, China and Indonesia don't have the lowest wages in the world, but they'll be among the lowest per unit they produce. So they're relatively cheap for the speed at which they can produce things. Basically, offshoring as much labor as possible is the goal for transnational companies. But some jobs like engineering jobs, research and design jobs can't be offshored. So what transnationals do is to minimize the number of high paid workers as much as they can, and then accordingly maximize the number of low wage or offshore workers as they can. And a company can do this if it mechanizes and segments the manufacturing process enough. With the right machines and on-site training and management, you can replace higher skilled laborers with lower skilled ones, and thereby offshore labor to poorer countries. So offshore labor and receiving foreign investment can be a good thing, obviously, for some global south countries. It can be something that these countries actively seek out. But there are some really grotesque hidden pressures, downward pressures that come along with these parts of the global production chain. So there's only a limited number of cheap manufacturing jobs available in the world, right? There's simply way more workers than there are jobs, and I'll get to why in a second. So essentially, poorer countries have to compete for those jobs. And for poor countries to win out and become the most attractive option for transnationals, basically it takes their governments and firms to suppress wages and labor unions, um, thereby being the cheapest option for transnationals. If working conditions become too comfortable, and begin holding even a candle to Western wages, then wealthy transnationals like Nike or Apple will just move elsewhere, set up with a partner in another country. So, contrary to the idea that capitalism will raise living standards for everyone, alleviate poverty, transnationals like really incentivize low wages for many of their offshore workers. And so you might ask, well, why can't a company in Africa or South America or South Asia just start their own thing, and employ employ their own people and pay good wages? Well, due to overproduction, um, the transnationals would just undersell the local competition. Like they just immediately flood the zone with goods so cheap that the local competition couldn't compete. The startup wouldn't be able to compete. Transnationals can obviously do this at a loss because they're making so much money from cheap labor elsewhere. They also have the advantage of having vast amounts of industry data through entrenched networks. They have deep market knowledge and access to ad spaces through goodwill and entrenched connections. This really is no small thing. Companies without links like this just can't compete in markets, especially ones where, the companies have to be really adaptive and dynamic. I mean, there are tech companies in Africa, for example, but they just can't compete globally. So even when the Global South company links into the global production chain through contracts with the transnationals, it needs to buy its most expensive capital, usually from the global north. Computers, software, machinery, or any transport will almost definitely be sourced from huge transnationals in the global north, Google, Toyota, etc. And these purchases often require loans and interest payments. So this is all like a steady transfer of money from poorer countries to richer ones, um, just just by the fact that they are existing in the production chain, like they're functioning in the production chain. It's a requirement for them to buy all this stuff from the already well entrenched companies. So the last point I'll mention is the typical lack of positive spillover effects tied to this offshore production in the global south. So when a country is the home of a large transnational, um, this fact promotes infrastructure for distribution in that country, industry related education, and related high tech industry startups as well. Global South countries just don't get those natural positive effects when their economies rely on lower tech subordinate industries that are the offshore production nodes of transnationals. Like it's more of a long-term gamble, for example, for a poor country to invest in universities when many of the jobs driving that economy don't require that education. Whereas it's a safer bet for a wealthy country to invest in universities, since many of its citizens might work in companies where that university training is then used to innovate and manage production in the global south. I guess one takeaway I've gotten from reading about global production is that while it can generally be a good thing, providing more jobs and cheaper products that some middle income countries can buy, um, the capitalism aspect of it has so many built-in pressures that restrict more employment and more potential opportunity. So, whatever system brings about global prosperity and relieves poverty, it just can't be capitalism, I think. So I'll leave it there, guys. Hope you enjoyed more ramblings. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.